And good morning, everyone, or good day, depending on where you are. I'd like to welcome you to another live Xanadu Gallery online critique group session. Today is Wednesday, April 27th, 2021, or 2022, excuse me. Good to be here with you again on a Wednesday morning for a critique session. I do want to announce we're going to have a little hiatus starting this. This will be our last one going into the hiatus. I'm getting ready to get packed up and head up to our gallery in Pine Top. We also have some Red Dot blog related projects that we'll be working on in the coming weeks. And so we're going to take a little break. We did this last year as well. We will not have any online critique broadcasts in the month of May and also in the month of June. So it's going to be a couple of months before we get back together. But don't worry, there will be other conversations going on and other things to keep up with. And then keep an eye out for an email announcing the next session. I'll be coming to you from Pine Top as we get into midsummer. But with that, I want to jump in and welcome our featured artist, Jan Dale. And good morning for me. Good afternoon for you, Jan. It is a pleasure to have you here. If I can have you come in and unmute, we will welcome you to the session. And Jan, let's start, if we can, by having you talk a little bit about your background and experience as an artist. How did you come to be creating the art that you're creating?
Well, it is a very 64-year long. Like a lot of people, I started very early, but not as a professional artist. Of course, I drew on the ceiling at home and on walls and any place I could. My parents encouraged me to get a real education and a real job. And so I kind of left that for a very long time. I still had my hand in, but in 2007, I discovered Dwayne Kaiser's Painting a Day thing and started following it and just, got pretty serious about wanting to really jump in and make that my profession. Then I ended up teaching school for a few years, and then in 2017 I was painting murals for bread and butter money, and in the summer and on school breaks. And then in 2017 the school district changed everything up, as they often do, and the literacy position that I had was eliminated across the district. They wanted to bring us back with less money, more work, and in the meantime, my mural income started to rival my teaching income. And I decided that was the moment that I decided I'm going to make a clean break. I'm going to go for this. And it's been a kind of a slow process, but here I am at the point where I'm now self-sustaining.
Excellent. Well, and so let's jump in and take a look at some of your art. And I'm going to want to come back to a couple of things that you mentioned and talk a little bit about the mural work. But let's start by looking at this piece. And maybe you can talk to us a little bit, Jan, about how you developed your, both your style and the subject matter that you're pursuing.
Well, in all the time that I was growing up, I noticed that, I've always been fascinated with birds. And I always noticed that whenever my dad would be out gardening and he would leave a rake or a hoe or something out, and he would walk away, and no sooner would he walk away, but there would be a bird sitting right where his hands had been. And I just kind of developed this feeling that birds are about as curious about us as we are about them. And so, of course, I started integrating birds into my work. And then, of course, when I saw the work of Karen Hollingsworth, I don't know if you're familiar with her, but she does a lot of bird stuff, birds indoors. And that's what got me interested in trying to incorporate the whole birds in people spaces sort of thing. And is that what you were?
Yeah, no,
asking?
exactly. And how about your style? How did your your palette and your approach to composition? How has that developed?
A lot of online learning. I'm not formally trained, so this is all trial and error and stuff. But I noticed that there were some artists that did work that was kind of almost like a little vignettes, not big, massive, overly complicated themes, just a little miniature story in a painting. And I've always been a storyteller. I love stories. I love to write, and so I've always had the feeling that my piece of artwork needs to tell a story, and it needs to be kept somewhat simple, not like real involved backgrounds and complex still lifes. This one you're showing is probably one of the most complex pieces that I've done. They're mostly pretty simple, like that.
Okay, good. So that gives us a little bit of an overview of background and your approach to developing your style. Let's take a quick look at presentation of the work. So here's another piece, and then we get to see your approach. This is a box stretched, gallery wrapped canvas. Would this be fairly typical for your format and presentation? We can see some in the video behind you, we see some work that's maybe more traditionally framed. So talk a little bit about what your approach has been to presentation.
Well, I do a lot of this for my larger pieces. The piece that you see behind me was in a show with the International Guild of Realism. And so, yes, it's framed because that was the requirement for the group show. I didn't want to get juried out. So this was like a nice gallery in Charleston, South Carolina. So I wanted to make sure. But this one that's right behind me here is more typical of what I do.
Okay.
The smaller pieces, because framing for a smaller piece is a little more economical than for a big, huge piece. I have been doing the smaller ones framed.
Okay, good. And then I think, actually that was what I have for presentation. So let's let me go ahead and go for some general reactions from, let's go to the group first, rather than I will also get some comments in from previously submitted by email. Those of you in the group, what is your reaction to Jan's work, to the style, the consistency? What does it evoke as you're looking at her work? I'd love to get your comments and have you have the opportunity to talk to Jan. And as usual, if I don't get volunteers, I will volunteer you. So let's see if we can get someone. You can either throw a hand up in front of the camera or click on the hand icon. Let me go to Juanita. And it should be asking you to mute. Good morning.
Good morning. I like your work, Jan, and it seems very competent. I enjoyed hearing about your narrative and the inspiration with the birds, and I'm not sure that's coming through in just looking at the paintings. It could be, okay, I just put a bird in there, but I especially like the balancing act painting, and that, I don't know, that draws me in more. For some reason, that seemed to have more of a story. So I like that.
Okay, excellent. And Juanita, as you look over the work, are you seeing, it's a little bit of a leading question because, we do have some thematic elements here, but do you see a consistency across the work in terms of the style and the subject matter?
Yes, I do. Excuse me. Personally, still lifes are not my preference, but the ones that seem to have more of a story, those would draw me in more, and then I would be tempted to look more.
Okay, interesting. Okay, good. So let me go and let me get some more reactions about the work. Who else wants to hop in? Gay, let me pull you in. There we go.
It's very beautiful. And although your surface seems very smooth, I think the paint, this is a completely different style to me. So here I'm talking about color. I find them, what I'm going to say is delicious. There's a texture and a fluidity to everything, which is very lovely. And I was thinking of the French artist Chardin. I don't know if you're familiar with him. I think, what, 1800? No, but around the time they were chopping people's heads off. Let me think, 1700s, okay, in France. And there's something, to my mind, compelling about the simplicity of the subjects you're doing. And I have a friend who began painting at 8 by 8 inches, and those are jewels. Those are what I call jewels. Those little paintings can go on a big wall and your eyes will be drawn to them. And I think some of your work seems, from what I've seen here, to have that quality. The storyline, I must admit, the birds flicked by me for a minute, but they're darling. But if you really like birds, I would encourage you to go for birds. Make them a little bigger, maybe, I don't know. But I love your work. It's just charming. And I mean that in a full sense of the word, not a slight one. And I do commend the way that you've not been taught. You've just picked it up as you've gone along, seeing how people do. It's very professional, beautiful oil work. So thanks.
Excellent. Thank you, Gay. Yeah. Any other comments that you want to make or reactions to the work? Let me go ahead and share a comment from Katrina in Oregon. And Katrina says, I really like the contemporary feel of Jan's paintings. I like the design elements or lighting very much. I particularly like her use of birds and how it brings a vibrancy and a liveliness to her paintings. I feel like she's a very strong, realistic painter with a great eye and a wonderful ability to see ordinary things outside of their context. And there were a couple of things that I found interesting about this. And I agree with, Katrina says, I like the contemporary feel of this work, which is kind of an interesting thought process when we think, okay, what is the subject matter? It's still lifes. Well, that's a subject matter that has been treated by artists through the ages. If I look at your palette, in fact, let me pull up an image here. I'm reminded, Gay mentioned a French artist, I'm reminded of some Dutch painters as I look at the work, that that muted palette and yet the sharp edges and the lighting we're looking at a Rembrandt here, but I could name a lot of other Dutch painters that similarly treated the work this way. Very classical in style. And yet I agree with Katrina's comment that, to me, you've achieved a very contemporary feel in the work, which is kind of it's a fascinating juxtaposition to me to think about this subject matter and your style having a whole, kind of contemporary feel to the work. And so I wonder, Jan, maybe talk about that as you're kind of thinking about your work and pushing forward. How much are you influenced by the past great artists, or are you kind of looking to chart your own course? Where are your influences coming from?
A lot. When I was a high school student, our high school art teacher took 5 of us and just let us go in the storage room, and we got to just create whatever we wanted because the rest of the class just wanted an easy A. And that's where I discovered Degas, Renoir, Rembrandt, and I used a lot of the reference books there, and I was just fascinated with the feel of their work. And I would say probably Rembrandt was one of my favorites. And as time went on, I found contemporary artists that looked like they were using Rembrandt lighting. Karen Hollingsworth was one of them.
Yeah.
So I was just fascinated with that muted palette and the limited palette. So I started researching about limited palette. I never got into the Zorn palette, but because I like using blue. So, but I did like the limited palette. I could do so much more with it. And then another artist that's more contemporary is Mark, but very classical, is this Mark Carter. Don't know if you're familiar with him. He's in Texas, and he's got some great tutorials that are amazing. And he has a similar, I don't even know if I want to compare to him because he's just so outrageously good.
Yeah, but it's, it's okay to take influences even if we're going in our own direction. It's just fascinating to me to see how certainly in the art world, the influences and ideas and concepts and approaches seem to come around and get fresh new life as we take a new approach to them. And so that's fascinating to look at your work and see that, and yet agree that it feels very contemporary and relevant, should find an audience that's very interested in this work. What I want to do now, Jane, is you submitted some questions, 4 questions, I think it was, about your work and an approach to the business. So I want to shift gears just a little bit and take each of those questions in turn. And what I'm hoping to be able to do is toss these questions first out to the group and get your responses. And then maybe, Jan, we can discuss a little bit more as well. And so the first question is related to subject matter. How diverse can subject matter be and still read as a cohesive body of work? And so for those of you that are here in the panel, how would you respond to that, both in the context of having just looked at Jan's work, but just in general, what kind of latitude do you feel like an artist has to have a variety of subjects, but still retain a consistency across that work? What response would you give? Elizabeth, let me go to you, and then I'll go to Michael.
Well, I think if your style is very consistent, and that might include your palette, I think you can change your subject matter quite a bit. It comes across in how you create and how you style your painting just on a consistent basis. And so I know, like, I do landscapes, but I do cloudscapes, and now I've started doing beachscapes, but it's all in my style and my palette. And people get that, that's what I've been told. It's like, yeah, I recognize your work, but I have different themes.
Good. Yeah, excellent. Michael, do you want to add to that? Let me see if I can pull you in. It should be asking you to unmute, or you can click on the microphone icon.
There we go. Unmute.
There we go. Gotcha.
The consistency's there with her work. When you look at her images, I see her hand. I see her hand touching the canvases. I see the consistency in the shoes, in the coffee mill, in all of like the cups, the teacups on the rack behind you. All of those show your handwork. And that's, every artist strives for that. You have a consistency of imagery. It doesn't matter the particular subject, whether it's the shoe or the bird or the jar or the coffee mill or the teacup. They're all very consistent. Your handwork is there. I was fortunate enough to work with Ralph Goins when he finished his MFA at Sacramento, and I was a teacher with him. And I see in you the same kind of consistency, and that's what I try for. It's what you do as an artist. It's in a way you can't help yourself. It is you.
Yeah, and I mean, I think we can see as we start talking about consistency, it can be a little bit hard to put our finger on it. We know it when we see it, but it can be a little bit hard to define. Other comments on striving to achieve consistency? Anyone else want to hop in on that? So I think that, Jan, in your work, because you have a very consistent style in terms of your brush work, and certainly your palette has a consistency to it. It would seem that you have some latitude to go a little bit, abroad when it comes to the subject matter that you select, and I would suspect, all you would have to do is bring a bird into that subject matter, and suddenly you're able to start really tying that all together, with almost the bird serving as a kind of signature for your work. And there can be a little bit of a fine line there, because we want to create the work and create that consistency without necessarily having it start to feel like the bird is my gimmick that I'm relying on, right? That we want it to be able to take it seriously and appreciate it and enjoy it. And yet, as I looked at these pieces, certainly I don't get the feeling of gimmickry there. That the bird becomes an element that almost acts as a kind of guide for me as I'm looking through this subject matter. So maybe talk about that a little bit, Jan. What other subject matter would you like to be able to create?
Well, before I answer that question, can I
Sure, of course.
point something out? Okay. So I've worked very hard at not making the bird the gimmick. It's a genuine passion. And so when I'm telling a story with the paint, I try to tie in not just the imagery, not just the still life, not just the bird, but the title, and that there is a correlation between what's happening. There's got to be some sort of action going on. This is called a well-earned rest, and these are actually my shoes that I wore for years, painting, climbing up on ladders, painting murals. And most of my murals now, I've kind of gotten into a lot of corporate stuff. So I do a lot of hand lettering. I do a lot of, non-image stuff, a lot of graphic type stuff. And so things like this one that you're showing here, this was actually purchased by another artist, a budding artist, somebody that's really just beginning, but she loved my work. And this is studio in spring. So these are things that I would have on my shelf in my studio. These are my brushes. These are chickadees, which are there's a whole story behind the chickadees, by the way. The first painting I sold was to another artist. It seems like, I'm attracting that kind of thing. And it was called Aspiring Chickadee, the first one that I sold. And so that was Aspiring Chickadee number 2. And it just connected with people that, they're doing their art, but there are these creatures that are kind of like watching over them or curious about them. I'm not mystical about it. I just love the vulnerability and the connection between the vulnerability of an artist, because we are kind of vulnerable, and a bird, which is very vulnerable. So there's that element of vulnerability in it.
And so let me take you back to the question on what other subject matter might you want to try and bring into the mix?
Well, I have an Instagram account, and I've started to attract a small following, very small, like under 100. So, but I kind of challenged myself recently, and I think this is one of the other questions. I challenged myself recently to just get in the studio, because I was having a struggle just getting into the studio. So I got in the studio, wanted to get in the studio every day and at least do a miniature. And I did a series of just unrelated subject matters mostly. And I did all these miniatures, and I got so much attention on the and sales on the little 2-inch by 2-inch tiny miniatures of teacups. And I got so much big response about the teacups that I decided, and you can see behind me, I've got 5 of the 10 that I'm going to do this week already painted. I've got some more started. And I've already got people that want them and want me to make more of that. And I was a little bit concerned that that if I move away from the style that attracted these people in the first place, and I start doing this other subject matter, you know, the teacups, that I'll lose the other audience. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Let me let those of us who are here in the group respond to that. How concerned should she be about the doing the teacups, which are a little bit different in terms of subject matter? What concerns might you have? Kate, let me go to you.
Okay, I don't see a problem, because when you think about it, birds and teacups, they're small things that, there's a lot of detail, and they're kind of specific to things. I don't see a problem at all with painting the both of them.
Good. I've got 1 vote for go for it. What other votes? Michael?
Your quality of your work speaks volumes way beyond what the subject matter is. Don't discount yourself. You're doing a great job. You're living your life as an artist. You're doing what you want, and it comes through in the paintings. That is what, no matter what the subject is going to be, your followers are looking for you.
Yeah.
They're looking for your hand. They're looking for what you do on a surface. It's magic time.
Yeah.
And your magic time. And for them, they see that magic. Now, not every artist is able to do that. You're blessed. You are.
Excellent. Thank you, Michael. Carol, you threw a comment into the chat, but maybe I could pull you in to make that comment in person about the audience.
Yeah, Jen, I was just had mentioned, don't underestimate your audience. They're happily going to follow you wherever your muse takes you. So go for it. And then our relationships with other people, whether, on a personal level or on a broader level, are many faceted. And people, don't pigeonhole yourself because you're worried about your audience pigeonholing you. So just reach it and have fun. Go for it.
Yeah, good. Okay, so it seems like we have some unanimity here on this question, that you've got some latitude when it comes to subject matter. I would echo that. I think that even though you are giving some variety in terms of subject matter, we still see the stylistic elements, your palette, and the underlying aesthetic sensibility in that work. It seems like that you shouldn't see any resistance. Now, I wouldn't necessarily feel like that you had to avoid in a 2x2-inch square doing some small birds. I would bet that there would be some interest in that subject matter as well at that scale. Sometimes it's both the subject matter and the scale of the work that might be of interest to people. So you can mix it up and experiment. And I think that's the last thing I'll say on this subject is that How can we know until we try? Let's experiment and get some exposure for the work and see how the audience responds and see where it takes you and see if you're enjoying it. And if you are, then you kind of keep pushing in that direction. Well, actually, I want to take even a detour, and then I want to come back to one of your questions. I wonder, Jan, you've mentioned that you do the mural work, commissioned mural work. How does that, or how has that, do you think, influenced your approach to your fine art? Certainly it's a different, somewhat different, but overlapping skill set. So maybe speak to that a little bit.
Oh golly, I don't even know how to answer that. I see them as very, very different. It's different when you're working with indoor latex paint and oil paint. I'm absolutely in love with oils. I back in 2007, I got very fascinated with oils. I was doing watercolor before that, and some other things, but I experimented with all sorts of things. But back then I got really, really fascinated with the oils, and working with acrylic paints and latex paints and whatever other I need for the surface for a mural is just, it's not as fun.
Yeah, it's work, right?
My husband went with me on a couple of projects recently. I've done 5 projects now for Gerdau Special Steel in Monroe, Michigan. So it's a big steel company, and we're going into these really, really grubby environments and transforming the administration building and all these things. And it was very lucrative and very enjoyable. But truth to tell, I just rather be in the studio doing this. Oh, I know what I was going to say. My husband went with me to help me on, carry the big heavy equipment and scaffolding and, all this other stuff. And he was with me on the project for one day. At the end of the day, he stopped and he went, "You work hard."
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, why do you think I come home exhausted and grubby?
It is, that would certainly be true in murals. I think it's true in the studio too. A lot of times I think there's an underappreciation of the amount of work that goes into creating, painting, sculpting. So certainly we can appreciate that. Let me go to one of your other questions, Jan. You asked about I'll just read it. I recently started to prefer a rigid surface as opposed to gallery wrapped canvases. Right now, this represents a little over half my work. Should I wait to approach galleries until I have more of my work on my preferred surface? I'm going to go ahead and take this one as a gallery owner and say that I wouldn't think that would be necessary. Again, because your style is so consistent, galleries, I think, would have some flexibility with you in terms of understanding that you have several different formats to work with. Certainly presentation and substrates are a factor in a gallery's consideration of your consistency, but they're not going to be the only factor. And I wouldn't want you to feel like, okay, now that I'm moving to a more rigid surface, I have to scrap all of the other work that I've done on canvas, because it would seem to me that you've got a great asset there in terms of an inventory of available work that could come into play. Now, some of your galleries may prefer one or the other, so your inventory may get pulled in different directions. But and by the way, I might not be able to make the same give the same advice to every artist, because if you've got a wider range of palette or subject matter, then your presentation may be an important factor in creating cohesion across the work. But because, Jan, that your work is already so cohesive and consistent, I wouldn't anticipate that being a particular problem. And then you already talked a little bit about the miniatures, and that was your third question, as you've got those coming into play. You ask, sold more of them than you expected, attract a wider audience. How might a gallery feel if I reserve that new section of my art for my subscribers and offer gallery only the works of a certain size and price range? Maybe let me throw that one out to the group. What do you think? Should she have maybe kind of reserve the work for different audiences? What would be the pluses and minuses, the pros and cons of that? Any suggestions when it comes to thinking about your body of work and having different sizes? Anyone want to hop in on that one? Michael.
I sell all sizes. I do a lot of 5x5 on gesso boards. I sold 24 to one customer. I sell 1 or 2 or 3 to another customer. I sell, like I'm working on a 3x4 foot behind me right now. I work in all sizes. I was fortunate enough to sell a nice bowl of strawberries to a former U.S. ambassador. You never know.
Yeah.
You do what you do. Don't hem yourself in to say, this has to go in this box and that has to go in that box, because it never happens.
Yeah.
I'm surprised every day. You never know that person coming through the door that you're going to strike a home run with, or you're going to strike out.
I'm going to agree with that, Michael. I think that, you know, as I have the opportunity to interact with buyers, you know, again, certainly we want some consistency and we want them to get a real sense of who you are, but size is another area where you can have some latitude to offer variety. And yes, you could certainly offer the smaller pieces to your Instagram followers or your local collectors, or if you're participating in local art fairs and shows, those might be a good item to bring along. But why limit that or restrict your galleries from having access to that inventory as it's available? And certainly some galleries will just love having that range of sizes. And as Michael says, we have artists who do that, and it is often the case that a buyer will see a grouping of the smaller works and will buy the whole set. And even though they're a lower price point each, as you start adding them up or can add them into the mix, they can really become a kind of bread and butter, both for you and for the gallery. And so, yes, you can offer them to your own audience, but I would include some in the portfolio, and you may find that galleries are fascinated by them and want them in the mix, which then leads to the next question you had, which was about pricing, because then you need to really start thinking about the mix. And you said, as I researched other artists' pricing practices, they're all over the map. I settled on method and structure that seems to work. However, my profit margin may shrink significantly with the addition of gallery commissions and shipping. How can I keep myself, my gallery, and my private collectors all happy? Yeah, that's the big question, right? Is how do I balance all of those needs at a price point that will work for everyone and generate sales? Maybe Jan, talk to that a little bit. What are you concerned that the challenges might be as you start pushing out to galleries and sharing and selling your work there?
Well, I started to do the math, and I make a decent profit when I sell just either through Instagram or mostly through my private email group. It's small. I've got like 103 subscribers, but they're very engaged. I've got a 60% engagement rate.
Let me stop you there, because that's not just an impressive engagement rate. That's stunning. That is what we are all aiming for in engagement. And so you want to take advantage of that. You've got an engaged audience, absolutely, to keep your work going out to them.
Okay. So in other words, I'm making a profit with the what I sell individually. But like I said, when I start adding, my goal is to start approaching galleries this year. I've got a list of about 26 that vetted very carefully for thinking that they would be a good fit.
Sure.
And so I've got a very, very, very researched list to start with. And, you know, looking at what galleries should take as their commission. It's a lot of, if I work hard, you're working just as hard, if not harder. And so, you know, so the gallery deserves that. You know, I respect that. I get that. But I don't want to raise my price for my private collectors so much so that I still make a good profit with my galleries. But I've read and that it should be consistent, that your price should be your price, whether you're selling it to somebody privately or selling it through a gallery. It should be the same price. Because you don't want the gallery to go back and go, hey, wait a minute, you know, you're undercutting me.
Exactly.
Yeah.
No,
So how do you handle that?
You have delineated, I think, a concern that every artist who is thinking about working with galleries is going to run into. You know, how do I balance these three stakeholders in my art, you know, and make sure that everyone is happy? And I would suggest that we kind of think about it, come back around to it in a little bit different direction. And that would be to start thinking about, okay, what I'm trying to achieve as I am getting my artwork out there is a good level of profit and sales. And, you know, as I've developed my own list, I've got my own collectors buying the work. Obviously, that's where I've got an opportunity to reach maximum profitability, because I don't have any other players in the game with me. I don't have any middle people between me and my buyers. Typically what's happening, though, is that an artist, as you're producing, you're going to realize I can never quite create enough demand among my own buyers to keep up with the inventory I'm producing. I can produce more inventory than I can produce sales and collectors. And so as that inventory continues to build, the question is going to press, you know, more urgently, how can I generate more sales? And that's where a gallery is going to come into play, is that a gallery is going to bring demand to your work. And that's where I create value for the artist, is by bringing buyers to the table and helping increase the volume of sales. And so there is going to be this little period as you're getting ramped up with a gallery or starting to show with multiple galleries, where yes, those sales and the gallery commission coming out are going to eat into a little bit of your profit margin, but you should very quickly start to see that made up by the volume of sales that you're seeing. And as the demand for your work then increases, you're right, the value is going to start to move up. And it is going to need to move up for your collectors as well. What I would say, though, is that the concern that you're expressing, well, you know, am I going to price my current collectors out of the market? I've often found that not to be the case, that your collectors are excited to see your success. You know, they're glad to hear about your shows in galleries. They're excited to have been in early or to know you personally. And often our concerns about them not being able to come along are overblown. Often and I've seen this time and again, where an artist starts showing within a gallery or starts seeing more success at shows and sales and starts increasing the value. And collectors that you've had for a long time will come to you and say, oh, your prices are going up. I've always thought you were underpriced and a great value. And they'll come right along and keep buying. So I wouldn't let that be the factor that slows me down in reaching out to galleries. I would just ask myself, what is a gallery going to be bringing to me in terms of being able to increase my exposure to a broader audience, in terms of being able to increase the value of my work? And, you know, Jen, you've got a great, you mentioned an email list going that responds to your work. You've got an Instagram following going, but we need to be thinking to the future as well. And, you know, you're still in the fairly early stages of your art career in terms of getting exposure and sales. And what we want to be careful about is that at some point, we're going to reach a saturation level with our current buyers.
Right.
Where if my email list is 300, 400, 500 people and growing, yeah, I want to see it growing and having new buyers. But those 300 or 400 people, some of them were never going to buy. Some of them are going to buy a piece or two and then want to move on to other to collect other artists. And some of them will continue to buy throughout time. But eventually, we're going to reach some level of saturation with them. And so the name of the game for an artist, for a gallery, really the lifeblood of our business is to have a constant new exposure to new potential buyers. And that's where galleries can really help you expand your reach. That's where online venues and social media can help you expand your reach. And so, we want to be aware of our profit margins, but we also want to be aware of our larger goals in terms of increasing volume of sales and broadening our exposure. And Jan, with that, we've run ourselves right past our time. I do want to thank you very much, Jan, for sharing your work with us and your background and giving us the opportunity to have a conversation about your work. Your great questions, I think, gave us all something to think about. So thank you so much, Jan.
Thank you so much. I've been wanting to get in on one of these for a very long time. Took a long time to get the courage up to ask.
So glad you submitted and shared your work. And I think I can speak for everyone here that we encourage you to keep pushing forward. In a very short time, you've done some excellent things with your work and with your outreach. And so keep going. And we'll look forward to hearing how it goes as you do outreach to galleries. Thank you to everyone for joining us, for your comments. And again, we're going to be on hiatus. It's going to be a couple of months. It'll feel like a long couple of months, but like I say, there will be other things going on to keep us connected. So stay tuned for that. Watch for an email as we get into July announcing our next session.